So this might look like a Magikarp just floating in a tiny pond, but it's actually a phone grape I made just for fun. Hey there, and welcome to my cozy art corner. If you're new here, I usually make handmade art and small collectibles, but honestly, I haven't had a single sale in about 3 years. So I'm thinking of switching gears. Instead of stressing over a shop, I just want to make things just for fun again. This is episode 1 of creating just for the joy of it, chasing that little dopamine rush that comes from actually finishing something. And since Magikarp's all about the patience, growth, and transformation, I figured he's the perfect little mascot to start this new chapter. So I started with making the base of the pond with this steel clay. It does have a little bit of the glitter effect mixed into the clay. I forgot what the name of the clay was. My plan was to make 2 ponds, one for this video and one for another video. But while I was making Magikarp, I decided to use both ponds, as you will see in the video why later. Now it's time to make the little pebbles that go around the pond. I just make a snake-like clay, then cut them down into small pieces. It doesn't have to be even, as every pebble are different shapes and sizes. The koi fish pond in the back are from my old shop I was planning on bringing back. I was trying to experiment with the base clay of continuing with the teal pond as usual, or try out a new method of using the gravel pond as the base and put UV resin inside instead. But for now, it is my prototype again. It was inspired by the animation TV show from Avatar: The Last Airbender scene of the Unity koi fish in the pond. To secure the pebbles onto the clay, I just used TLC, which is short for translucent liquid clay. If you haven't used this stuff before, it just acts like a glue for the clay, and when baked, it will dry like how glue dries. And since this is translucent, it will dry translucent. When putting on the pebbles, I just used a needle tool I got from my best friend for a Christmas gift. But before she gifted me this tool, I would just use a wooden toothpick stick instead, since it acted the same way a needle tool does. I like to go around the sides of the pebbles to make sure any pebbles aren't going to be falling off when baking, and to make sure they're even around the pond. Now I'm just going to work on the other pond really quick. Moving the pond aside, here are my inspiration pictures I found off of Pinterest to make my Magikarp. I wanted something more on the plain and simple side, but I ended up taking this picture of the Magikarp instead because I didn't want to do just the dot eyes. Taking out my scrap clay stash, this container has been with me since the day I started in the early 2000s and remind me how far I've come. You will often see me use it in almost all my videos. So right now I'm just looking for all the colored clays I will be using for Magikarp. There was a little bit of red stuck on the yellow clay and I thought about using it for blush for the cheeks, but later I forget to use it. I have a lot of other containers for my clay as well. This container is from the big containers that hold the individual containers like these. But most of the time I just leave them in the original wrappers and put them in my plastic drawers I bought from Michaels. So starting at the base of the Magikarp, honestly I didn't know where to begin at first. All I thought about was trust the process and we'll eventually get to it. Or I might just try to make it, and if it comes out ugly, I'm just not going to make this video and try to make a different character instead. When making the crown for Magikarp, I wasn't sure how I was going to make it. At first I decided to just make it by cutting it out of clay. I just cut out my finger because I personally didn't want to scrape it off of the acrylic block. But I ended up not using this clay cutout design at the end because the crown looked lopsided and uneven, and I wanted a more 3D look, not a flat cutout look. So onto the thinking board again. I thought about just combining 3 points together like this, but at an angle, and just blend it together as best as I could. I love this design so much better. You can see the big difference in both the designs. When putting on the crown, it was giving Torchic at this point, but we still have to trust the process. To make the fins, I just used translucent clay and flattened it with my acrylic block. Then I added the snake clay around the fins like so. I cut off the ends and used the back of my X-Acto knife to give that fin effect texture lines. Then I added the body to the tail to see how it was gonna look. I decided to continue the face features first before adding the tail back on again. To achieve the mouth, I just cut a bit of clay off first. I tried to smooth the area out a bit. Then I added an oval clay and used my acrylic to flatten it out. It didn't bother me that the black wasn't flattened all the way to the edge because we were going to be covering around it with the pink clay to give it lips. Now it's starting to look a little more like Magikarp. For the eyes, instead of just doing a plain dot eye like in the first reference photo, I went with the second photo that gives Magikarp its signature eye but with more of a cartoon look with the bigger pupil. Now he just looks weird again right now, but we're still trusting the process. We're now adding on the side fins. My translucent plate had a little bit of orange clay when mixing it, but it doesn't bother me because it's just for myself. I just stuck the translucent clay onto the body, then wrapped around some orange clay for the fins. Cut off the extra clay that isn't needed. Using the back of the X-Acto knife to make the indents of the fins. Now we have to do the other side of the body as well. Add the tail back on. I decided to add it a bit lower because we're going to be cutting him in half. I thought about cutting him right down the middle, but ended up just cutting right under the fins. But let's put on an acrylic block to get a cleaner cut. At this point I was hesitant again and ended up cutting him right in half under the eyes. Here's how he looks like cut in half. Now to add him to the pawn so he can look whole again. The tail was a bit crooked, so I tried to fix it. And since the sides were pressed together, I tried to push them out to make it look like he was swimming with them. Here's how he looks like in the pond. We're not finished with him just yet. So since I cut him in half, I didn't want to just throw away the bottom part, so I decided to use it and make another one. So a little backstory about Magikarp. I chose Magikarp for a reason. He's known as the weakest Pokemon. All he does is splash around and everyone jokes about how useless he is. But if you're patient with him and you keep showing up, eventually he evolves into something amazing. And I guess I relate to that. For the last few years, I've been trying to make my little art shop work. I put in so much time and love, but I never really got anywhere. No sales, no growth, just me splashing around hoping something would click. But Magikarp reminded me that it's okay to just be where I am. That growth doesn't have to mean going viral or selling out a shop. Sometimes it just means finishing something, even if it's small. Maybe this is my Magikarp phase. Awkward, messy, learning, but that's okay. Because even when he's just splashing, Magikarp's still moving forward, and so am I. Anyways, this is the bottom half of the original Magikarp all finished. Can you tell he was even the bottom half? He does look a little smaller though. I did think about putting him in my shop, but since this is an episode where I just make things just for fun, I might just keep him, or just put one of him in the shop and continue my series. Now it's time for them to go bake in the oven. Here they are, all baked and cooled down. I'm quite proud of how they turned out, but I did realize after editing the video that I was missing the biggest part about him, and that is his whiskers. But we're going to pretend that they're inside under the water and we just can't see them right now. Here's a close-up of them before they get some coating. I like to use UV resin to coat the bottom of the pond first, so the resin doesn't seep through the little cracks through the holes from the pebbles. I'm just adding a little bit more UV to add some depth before curing. After the first layer has cured, I add more UV resin on top. Then to make Magikarp look like he's not in a plain pond, I pre-made and pre-baked some lily pads and bubbles from translucent clay. Usually when I make my yin-yang koi fish pond from Avatar The Last Airbender, I already add the bubbles and lily pads onto the clay, then bake it together before resining the whole thing. But today we're going to be doing a longer step to see if we can achieve the floating lily pad effect and give it some depth. My last lily pad did accidentally flip over, but that's okay because we're going to be adding resin on top to secure the whole thing again, after the second layer has cured. I'm just using the orange clay to attach to the pond so I have a better grip to resin and secure everything down this time. To spread everything around evenly as possible, I use a small paintbrush and add more resin if needed. Sometimes working with UV resin is not best to work where the sun is shining on the table because the resin will cure and can make the resin clumpy or cure completely since the sun gives out UV light as well. Most time I do work at night with a light source, but since our backyard does have a cloth that covers the light out, the sun doesn't directly hit my table. There is light from the sun, but it's not full direct light to make the resin cure completely. I like to make sure my whole pond is coated all the way around because I will be making him into a phone grip, so I don't want him falling off or falling out of his pond. Sometimes the resin doesn't cure under the UV lamp, so I like to put them outside in direct sunlight to cure completely. This is my UV lamp I bought from Let's Resin. It comes in two pieces where you can cure from the top and the bottom, but if I'm being honest, the light only works when it's plugged in. So if the top one is plugged in, the bottom one doesn't work, which I personally thought they both were supposed to turn on if connected. But that's not the case and I was so disappointed, and it's basically misleading in my point, but it does work and still does the job. I still prefer the sun over UV lamps though. So it's the next day because it takes me more than 20 minutes to cure it and it's still tacky, so I leave it outside for the resin to harden completely in the sun again before we continue. These are the foam grips I have on hand. I have probably 50 or more of these that I bulk bought that I was planning on selling my koi fish pond, but since I'm starting this series, I might just make all my pond foam grips with water Pokemons for now. These are the cheaper quality phone grip. I would definitely upgrade to a pop socket for higher quality, but since it's just a personal clay series for making fun stuff, we're gonna have fun making more. So subscribe if you haven't already to not miss the next one, and comment down below who you think I'm going to be making next. So before I glue Magikarp and his pawn on the phone grip, I like to score the top of the phone grip and the bottom of the clay a bit, just so the glue has something to hold on to. Since I have 2 Magikarp in a pond, I was thinking about making the second one into a magnet instead, but I don't have any magnets, so I'm just gonna turn it into a phone grip too. Then I wipe away all the dust and the clay particles that got scraped off to have a cleaner surface. I just use E6000 to glue everything down. The glue will make it slide a bit, so I try my best to reposition it to sit in the middle as best as I can while pressing down firmly so the glue dries and adheres it in place. There will be a lift gap, but I'm personally not too worried about it, because I go over it with UV resin to secure it down completely by adding a little bit inside the gap and around the rim of the phone grip and the side of the pond. I go over it another time after I cure this layer, just to make sure the pond isn't going anywhere at all. While I cure the first pond, I'm going to be coating the second pond too. I like to work little by little so the resin isn't dripping off on the other side. My resin never fully cures under UV light, but I always just use the lamp just to flash cure it for at least 2 to 3 minutes or so. Then I just put in my container and leave them outside all day in the sun until fully cured. It's been raining the last couple days, so today was a lucky day to have sun, but it did get cloudy again, so I went to check up on them and they were completely cured already. Don't mind the mess in my container, everything is everywhere. Some are fully cured, I just leave them in there for now. They're just extra or prototypes from my earrings and phone grips I had on my shop. So I like to use a magnetic pop socket on my phone, but I'm going to be temporarily taking it off to show you guys how the Magikarp looks like when I put it on my phone case. The base is definitely smaller, but you would peel this on the bottom like a sticker and just apply it to your surface, whether it's your phone, iPad, tablet, Kindle, or wherever you plan to use it on. I'm not going to be peeling it because I use my magnetic pop socket, but if I do plan to use it, I would definitely buy more pop socket and apply the pond onto the top of my pop socket the same way I did with this phone grip. Then I can change out my pop socket design whenever I feel like it. And there he is, Magikarp just happily swimming in his little pond. Honestly, I'm so glad I took the time to make this. It feels really good to finish something again, not for a shop, not for sales, just for the joy of making art. I forgot how nice that feeling is. If you made it this far, thank you for hanging out with me in my little art corner. This is just the beginning, episode 1 of creating for fun again. If you'd like to see where this new chapter goes, feel free to stick around. No pressure, just cozy vibes, craft, and maybe a few more Pokémon in a pond. Until next time, keep creating, stay kind, and remember to enjoy the process and the little things that make you happy.